Welcome to I'm Spiritual Dammit. I'm your host, Jenniffer Weigel, and joining me, William Corgan. How you doing?
I'm fantastic, Jen.
You have a lot going on. You're extremely busy because you have a solo album release coming out. And this is exciting because, well, I think you should explain what's different and what people might misunderstand about the release of this album when you are going on tour. It's just you, right?
Yeah, I think maybe some people assume that it's me with the band
Right.
playing, variations of what I would normally do. No, it's totally solo. No accoutrement, which is pretty wild because I think I've only done maybe one show like that ever. So to do a full tour and then do 2 sets and about 2 hours of music spanning the new album and the whole 30 plus years that I've been writing songs is pretty wild.
So you will play some of the older, you will also play the new, Oogie La La, and for you to decide how that set's going to go, that's not exactly an easy task.
I tried to pick a song from kind of every significant era of my music life, which is a bit austere sometimes because you end up having to sort of pick some songs that maybe aren't as familiar to the audience. But the great thing is you have to really find those songs that live up to the level of the songs that maybe people would know. In essence, they have to pay their own freight. There's nothing sentimental about the show in the sense of if I'm going to play a song like Tonight and I'm going to play a song from an album that maybe wasn't as popular, that song better carry its own freight. It can't feel significantly lesser than maybe the better known song. So it's not been a struggle, but it's been a bit of a archaeological dig trying to find those songs that not only are really great songs, but also songs that in the acoustic frame carry their own weight.
For you as a performer, how is it different for you now to look out and see all these people with their phones pointed at you? I mean, even just today, you were doing an impromptu concert at your tea house, Madame Zuzu's in Highland Park, and I was excited to video you playing a song, and I stopped myself and I put my phone down so I could absorb the experience actually in person versus watching the video later, and I so much more enjoyed that, and people don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I think we've had about 10 years of examining the shift in our culture as far as how social media plays into technology, plays into the way people are behaving
Right.
in public. Everything from people passing laws, you can't text and walk. Certainly text and driving is very dangerous. Holding up your phone at a concert, obviously not so dangerous, but it has changed the relationship between the performer and the audience and the performer.
Right. For you, though, what do you like about it and what do you not like about it?
I'm really pretty benign in the whole thing.
Okay.
Through the years, I've had to get out of the sort of the psychological end of why is the audience doing this or reacting to that? Because as I've gotten more into my own life, as I think a lot of people do as they enter the middle part of their life, you become more absorbed in your friends and your family and the life that you've built for yourself. And so I had to make a similar adjustment in understanding that it's not really for me to say to somebody who's 35 plus what proper etiquette is at a concert.
Right.
I know some performers believe that phones should be kept away or put in a pocket or put in a sleeve that you can't access unless it's an emergency and blah blah blah. I'm out of all that business. I just look at this like, look, whatever you're up against. In 1987, I was up against some guy at a bar trying to pick up a girl and the clinking of bottles. So in 2017, I'm up against hey, I need to check my Facebook because I may have missed something in the last 3 minutes. And I just look at it, it's the same ideological opponent, which is what you're doing on stage more interesting than what's going on in the audience? And that's up for me to figure out. I can't put that on the audience, like, I'm so special, you must pay attention. It's actually the opposite. I must supersede the expectation, or it's not really worth their while to come.
So you make it so that they can't check their phone because they're so completely enthralled.
Well, that would be the idea. It doesn't always work, and social norms have changed. People talk more at concerts than they used to. People seem more distracted than they used to. Their tolerance for the length of a concert has shrunken, and it really puts an interesting pressure on a performer that every moment of a concert kind of has to be important. you don't have that sort of 10 minutes to meander around in your own indulgent sort of solo or something, knowing you can kind of pick the crowd back up on the other side with a known song or something. Mm-hmm. So I take it as a challenge, like, okay, I'm going to try to get up to this sentient consciousness, which is I've got 90 minutes or 100 minutes or whatever, and I have to bring an A game to keep this audience's attention so that when they walk out of they think that was worth their time, because time has never been more valuable than it is in this culture.
Mm-hmm. And you say, too, today when you were playing, like 1,500 people were watching when you were just playing for 3 minutes because of the demands of social media and the immediacy of social media. Having 10,000 diehard fans who are going to all buy your new album is way better, you say, than having 80,000 Twitter followers that won't go purchase one song, really.
Yeah, I think people have, there's been a lot of energy and ink spent on trying to understand the difference between an audience that seems to tacitly be interested and then what they now call engagement. Okay. And what the empirical evidence has shown in the last couple years, now that we basically have 20 years of data, that engagement is far, far more important than somebody just hitting a like button. In essence, passive engagement is kind of, you could almost argue, is not only worthless, it's actually negative. Because you're looking at that number and you're thinking, I've got, in the case of the Pumpkins, I think we have something like 4 million people on Facebook that like the band or follow the band. The way the algorithms, or what, I can never say that word, but the way those systems are set up on Facebook is not all 4 million people actually get what you post. So that's part of the kerfuffle there. Right. But even then, just because something goes up by in somebody's timeline doesn't mean they're going to stop. They're going to pay attention. So, do you fall into the game of being reductionist, like, here's me in a clown nose, so you'll stop and actually engage in what I really want you to engage in? Or do I just trust that maybe word of mouth, which is back to the old word of mouth is the most powerful form of advertising, and or in the modern parlance, engagement, that engagement is actually more important. A committed person who actually believes in your vision and where you're going as an artist, that one person can move 10 people. Mm. But 10 people are passively engaged, chances are you won't even get one person. It's just the way the math works. And again, I'm totally cool with it. I don't sort of mind it, because as far as I'm concerned, you should be able to rise up to the challenge that's presented to you. And every culture and every generation presents unique challenges as far as what they're interested in musically and socially and aesthetically and politically. And so if you want to be in that conversation, you need to rise up to the level of that. To me, it's almost like a speed. It's like, you have to be able to hit the 99-mile-an-hour fastball. And if you can't, you don't belong in the major league. So.
You once shared with me that when you were inspired, like you literally heard, I think it might have been the beginning of Cherub Rock, where you heard it and you were in a car and you were like, get me out. I gotta go get this out of I gotta download this quick or it's gonna be gone.
No, I said, well.
Was that Cherub Rock?
Yes, but you've changed the story.
Okay, well, let's get it right.
Now, I heard the riff in my head, and I was 25 minutes from home in a car that was being driven by a friend, and so I hummed the riff for 25 minutes until I got back to my apartment, and then actually picked up a guitar. And I've actually had it happen a few times where the minute you pick up the guitar, somehow the riff gets lost. Mm. So I was super paranoid that when I picked up the guitar, something would be lost in translation. Mm-hmm. And luckily, the riff was in the right key of the guitar, and that's the riff. I don't know why it came to me the way it did. It was unusual, for sure.
That's great. So for this album, was your writing process different? I'm sure it's evolved as you've aged, but is there a process that you have to have to get inspired? Do you need to, have a certain breakfast? Do you need to be in a certain room, have a certain guitar in your hand?
No, I see creativity as being available. Okay. So if you make yourself available, you should find some inspiration. The real issue becomes, can you translate the moment of inspiration into something that has substance? Mm-hmm. Can you turn it into a lyric or a poem or a journal entry? Can you get something from this kind of crystalline moment of like, aha, something about the way the sun is setting? I want to encapsulate that in a way that translates into art. So yeah, I don't have any problem with the inspiration part. I'm sort of a purpose-driven person. Like, what's this for? In the case of the OG Lal album, I was working on a sort of very futuristic Smashing Pumpkins album. I didn't like where it was going, so I abandoned it. And I found myself sitting at home kind of glum and depressed, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go back to the simplest thing that I can do, which is, can I write an acoustic song that actually is engaging me? and then maybe there'll be something there. And so after I wrote maybe about 10 songs like that, with no purpose other than I just want to be engaged in the music that I'm writing and feel that I'm moving forward, I called Rick Rubin and said, I've got these songs and I need to find a producer, and I thought maybe you could recommend someone. And he said, I'm actually interested in what you're doing, so can you send me the music? And I sent him the songs, and about a month later he called me and said, I'd love it, keep writing more, whatever you're doing, do more of it. And so I wrote a whole nother batch, obviously with some wind at my back, thinking, okay, if Rick's reacting, something's happening here.
Right.
And it did feel special, but that doesn't always translate either. But it did feel like I was onto something. And I toyed for years with acoustic music as a sort of a main frame. I've always had acoustic music in the music that I've done. The albums that I've done, even the rock albums, have acoustic songs and stuff like that. But this is the first time really committing to the form all the way for me. Actually, no, that's not true. I made an acoustic album in 2004 that I've never put out. That was about Chicago, and so that's sitting on a shelf.
That's sitting on a shelf. How many songs do you have sitting on a shelf right now that haven't seen the light of day?
Maybe 100.
Okay. So you have to find a reason to bring them out, let them out, show them to Rick. I mean, what's it going to take?
I think I've had my heart broken many, many times by the internet, thinking that, again, the numbers that I was seeing, the engagement that I thought I was seeing, would translate to an audience that would show up under a specific circumstance.
Okay.
So, you think, okay, if there's 4 million people on Facebook and I press up 500 of this album that I've made, well, those should sell no problem. And they don't. So that doesn't mean they're rejecting you. It doesn't mean you haven't engaged them in a way that makes them think they would be interested in what you're doing. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to take music that I really poured my heart into, throw it into that maw, and expect that it's just going to automatically translate. Again, I think the onus is on me to tell a story. So in the case of the unreleased acoustic album, about Chicago, maybe if OG Lala was successful in a way that people said, oh, I'm interested, how did you get here? Well, I've got this other music that I've never put out. I mean, I'm sitting on probably 50 acoustic songs, between a soundtrack that I did for a movie called Spun, work I did at home before the Chicago album, and then the Chicago album itself. There might be something like 50, 60, 70 songs there. So maybe if there was momentum for me as an acoustic artist, then you would say, okay, now those people are engaged, I can actually get them to be interested in this, where, the classic thing is like, well, does it sound like Smashing Pumpkins? It's like, does it taste like chicken? It's like, that's how it feels sometimes. It's like, you can't, I don't know if this will translate as an idea, but I think the early indication on the internet was a bit, if you get a little bit reductionist and you get a little bit simple, it will translate into this bigger audience. Rather than go through a record company and a TV station and a radio station, hey, if you just make this a little simpler, you're going to have access to this massive audience. And now I actually think it's the opposite.
Really?
I think you have to say, this is who I am, this is why I'm different, and this is why I'm unique, and this is why there's nobody like me, for better or worse. Because the more you go into specificity, the more you also repel people. You attract some and you repel others. But again, if that audience that's coming forward is engaged, even if it's 10,000 people, that's super powerful.
Exactly.
Because that sets up an economic and a social base that you can work with. When you go into the wider base, and then you got to start answering questions like, well, what does it sound like? Does it sound like Smashing Pumpkins? And suddenly you're trying to dance on ground that you actually the work you've done has nothing to do with that.
Right.
You're trying to navigate a field because you think you're going to have access to this bigger number. And the reality is that bigger number is interested in the Smashing Pumpkins. Great. So if I can't turn around and say, well, this is like that, because I don't intend it to be like that. Right. So if you're honest, you will find an audience that will honestly respond to what you're trying to do. And I think that's where the magical part can still happen.
You shared a story at Madame Zuzu's about how if your albums were going to be sold at Walmart, that you would have to change the name of a song. Can you repeat that story?
We were putting out Siamese Dream in 1993, and there was a song with a naughty word in the title, and we were told that Walmart, which at that time was just becoming a massive retailer, I don't think I'd even ever heard of Walmart before. I knew Kmart and stuff, but they said, well, this massive retailer won't put out your album unless you...
you can say it. It's a podcast.
I don't want to say it. I don't swear in public.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, so they said you have to change the name of your song. And so I changed the name of the song to Silver Crank. And for those of you who know what a crank is, you'll get the joke.
Okay. We do a monthly event at your tea house where we discuss intuition, and we call it an evening with spirit. And you've been very open about your beliefs in intuition and spirituality. You're also in your faith and Christian. For those who can't understand how you can be a big fan of Jesus and also entertain the thought that people can channel other dimensions, I mean, do you ever feel the need to explain that? Do you care if people have an issue with that? How do you explain your spiritual space right now?
Well, in terms of experience, when people come at you from a negative place about religious dogma, they don't really want a discussion. That's been my experience. That doesn't mean it's true, but my experience is they want to fight. And they want to fight about something that none of us can truly say. Like, it's not like saying, well, what was the score of the baseball game? You're wrong. Let's look it up on the internet. When you talk about God or spirit, there is no point of resolution. So you're arguing about a speculative thing, and I'm no more right than the other person is wrong, and vice versa. So I tend not to get into those arguments. But what I have said to people who at least seem open is the Bible itself is rife with people who are channeling spirit, who receive messages from other dimensions or other places. The burning bush, and how do we know the burning bush wasn't just a burning bush? There's been cases in the world where things spontaneously light on fire. How do we know that the vision that this person had wasn't just made up in their mind? I just think that it's a lack of creativity when you start going down the road of saying, this is real, this isn't real. Was Jesus real or not? I think all those points are irrelevant, and that's not to say that I believe that Jesus Christ was a real person. But if you believe that Jesus Christ wasn't a real person, that's fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter to my belief that you don't believe or believe with me. It has no bearing on my belief system. I read the Bible as a tome that's very much about spirituality as we would define it in the modern New Age sense. You had a man who was a prophet, who was like us, who had a vision of the world that was higher than others, and through that vision has attracted people with great consistency for over 2,000 years. Take it or leave it. I mean, I mean, this is a horrible analogy, but I mean, if we could listen to an album made 2,000 years ago and we were still interested in the album, you say, well, there must be something there. Okay, so even if you want to go completely on the opposite side and say it's a projection and it's a myth, well, I would say then maybe we need the myth. Maybe the myth is powerful to keep it around because something about the myth combats something in us that creates a question that wants to be answered, which is, who are we? Why are we here? What is our purpose? So,
can we tap into source? Can we be healed? Do you think that's possible? Do you think we can communicate with other dimensions? All of those things.
I think all that stuff is self-evident. To me, it's so non-political that it's not even funny. I don't even feel there's anything to defend. Right. I think history is rife with artists, avatars, and common people who, through magic, had an experience that then changed them, and then through their translation of that experience changed others. Right. So call it what you want. I mean, a song is a form of magic. It's a spell unto itself. TV is a form of magic. I mean, we've all been hypnotized by a bunch of dreck. So take it for what it's worth. I mean, again, if your battleground is dogmatic, great, but I don't really think that has anything to do with life. Life is really more of an experiential thing that has to do with whether or not you're guided through your experience or through your intuition or through what you see or feel, and it takes you from one place to another, and hopefully in that transition, not only do you learn something, but it makes you want to be a better person and contribute in a way that you make the world a better place. And that completely lines up with, I don't care who your religious figure is, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the great peacemakers of the earth. That if that's dogma, that lines up. Like, that doesn't exclude anybody. Right. That's an inclusive approach, which is, I'm going to honor, it goes back to the Gnostic tradition in Christianity, which the church went way out of its way to snuff out. Because up until about 300 AD, the church was split into the Apostolic Church and the Gnostic Church, and the Apostolic Church went out of its way to wipe out the Gnostics. And there's a great book by, I believe her name is Elaine Pagels, about the early roots of the Gnostic Church. What was the Gnostic Church? I'm going to have a singular experience with God, and I'm going to share that singular experience with others. In essence, God is so vast that I can have a singular experience with creation, which is fantastic. I mean, that's what being an artist is.
Right. I'm
sharing my singular experience with others, and thankfully they're attracted to that experience with great consistency. It's not for everybody, but that's okay. I mean, I believe it's the singularity that defines the experience. In essence, I need to believe that my experience is singular enough to want to share it. And that's great. Hey, I came up with this new recipe that combines, spaghetti and Malaysian cooking. Great. If it's awesome, I want to try it. I want to have that experience with you. That's where the communion part comes in.
Right. You've been very open about battles with sadness and vibration, and you recently shared a story where when you would relive your childhood, it was sort of like your cape that you wore that defined who you were. And we have a choice to really hold on to that and make it matter, or can we evolve from that and then it no longer has the weight that it did? Does that make sense?
I look at it slightly differently in that most people are attracted to whatever serves them.
Okay.
So a positive story or a negative story. People will tell their positive, negative stories because it defines them in a way that expresses something about the way they feel about themselves. It's hard to explain, but it's self-reflective.
Right.
And so when you overly adhere to the negative story of your life, true or not, it becomes like a weight around you at some point. And you should ask yourself, and I certainly did, why am I still carrying this, let's use the analogy, this cape, this story, this millstone around with me after 30, 40 years? Like, why is it still serving me? Maybe I should get a new story. And in my experience, when you take very, very powerful negative experiences in life that you truly believe happened, the healing point is when you translate those stories to where they no longer have an emotional punch to them. They're as important to you as, hey, I went to the Cubs game and I saw this amazing game, and oh, this thing happened to me when I was a kid. It was really awful, but it doesn't have a resonant emotional energy anymore. It doesn't define who you are emotionally. It just defines who you are in terms of your story. It's like turning pages in a book.
Right.
And no page really should be more important than the next.
Okay.
If you can reach that point in your emotional connection to your past, that means you've actually accomplished something, because your past is not defining your present and your future. And that's where it's tricky, because you actually do have to examine your past, and you have to examine your experiences and your role in it to heal. But once you do heal, then they don't have the same value they once did, nor should they.
Right. What keeps me up at night, because I'm a journalist, and so I ask a lot of questions to gain knowledge, because I feel that that's the only way we can evolve, because otherwise we'd still think the world was flat and we'd be smoking on the airplanes. What keeps you up at night? I mean, for me, it's all these big questions, and how can we get evidence to prove that there's more going on than what we can see and touch. But for you, now you're a dad, it's probably changed your perspective on a lot of things. What keeps you up at night?
I think, and this is my own belief, we all must at some point face what I would call the existential crisis, which is life is a ticking clock. We don't know how many minutes and hours and days and years are left on that clock, and we have to kind of make a decision internally about, is what I'm doing actually worthwhile? Is it match my own inner dream of what I thought my life would be and what I'd like my life to be? Is there still time to accomplish that dream? Or do I need a new dream? Or, do I need to go to the Himalayas to figure it out? In essence, it's a weird combination of budgeting one's time based on a very ephemeral idea of the time that you have left, and then really going through the existential crisis of, even if I do everything I want to do, and even if every dream comes true, does it really matter?
Right.
Because how many great people have lived on this planet that we will never know their name, we will never know their accomplishment. We can only feel the effect of the ripple of their grace through humanity, and yet, there's no statue for them.
Right. So have you exceeded your dreams? Are you complacent? Are you happy? Are you still going to keep going? Obviously, you're going, but do you feel like you've got another race to run?
I think that when you commit very young, like I did, to a material path, in essence, my spiritual path was tied to my material path.
Got it.
Meaning, if I succeed, I'll get where I want to get spiritually. Well, I did that, and I didn't get where I wanted to get spiritually, which caused a massive spiritual crisis, which then had a material effect on my decision-making as vis-a-vis what is often referred to derisively as a career. And somehow in this part of my life, I've come out the other side where I don't really care if what I'm doing is meaningful to others. It's meaningful to me, so I'm going to keep doing it. And I'm going to trust that somehow, if it's done really, really well, that it will have the effect it's meant to have. And I'm going to get out of the observational business of, is it having the effect I want in the time I want it to have?
Is that hard?
Yeah, it's difficult because ultimately you have to give yourself over to, a higher power, which is, I'm going to trust that if I do good things, it will mean something on the big grand scale of karma or something. Because if you're looking moment to moment to moment for approval or recognition or justification for the efforts you made, humanity has shown consistently that's really not paying that much attention. And even when it does pay attention, it doesn't pay attention for too long.
Right.
So in the course of my life, I've maybe put out 11, 12 albums, something like that, and hundreds of songs, something like that. The common person on the street might know a couple of those albums and 10 of those songs or something, which is actually pretty good. I mean, mathematically, you're still in the 99.999. But on the other side, you're thinking, yeah, but they haven't heard the other 200 songs and this album that I really love. And that can become really dispiriting. Moving into a frame of mind where you say, look, I'm just going to do the work. I'm going to put all my energy into the work, and I'm going to trust the universe that this thing's going to sort it out. So if they're listening to the next album on Planet Quasar in 100 years, and it's important to the Planet Quasar in 100 years, that's cool. But I'm not going to get caught up in whether or not I'm competing against God knows who in the social sphere, against things that, you can argue, quite rightly, are more important than something that, falls in the category of entertainment. And music, by and large, has lost much of its moral position in the culture. So it's even hard to make an argument in real time that music has a moral force behind it. It really has become more entertainment. Right. And it's really meant to sell other things, including brands and perfumes and stuff like that. Again, no argument. It is what it is. So if you make an internal decision that what you're going to do is really more personal at the level of, well, I think it's great, and I'm not really going to get caught up in whether or not you think it's great. You're accepting that you're probably going to live on that island most of the time by yourself, and that's okay. That's a peace. That's something that you can only arrive at with peace and experience.
What does Odilala mean?
I won't tell anybody.
You won't. Okay, no. Got it. Good to note. And so, how many cities on the tour?
I think only 8 or 9.
Okay.
It's a pretty limited thing.
I know you're hitting Colorado, you're hitting Nashville, you're hitting LA, you're hitting New York, Chicago. We've got 2 shows coming up in Chicago, Athenaeum Theater, on the 24th, 25th of October, I believe. Go to the website, ogilala.com, for all the tour information. I know before I get inspired to write, I listen to classical music. I don't know why. It's something about the vibration of it. I'm talking the Brahms, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. What gets your vibration up? Other than your music, of course. What gets you there? Is there anything, I'm not just about inspiration, but what you think helps raise your vibration? Is there a music of choice, or does that change with your mood?
It's honestly silence.
Is it? It's even better.
Silence. Mm-hmm. I can kickstart my inspiration by listening to, to somebody I really admire, like Bob Dylan or John Lennon or, Cheap Trick.
Got it.
But it doesn't carry through. Silence is, I'm sitting in this kind of abject poverty of noise. Mm-hmm. I live out here in the country, sort of, and I'm surrounded by silence, sort of. And, it goes back to, the Sistine Chapel. What is that spark that starts this whole game afoot. And for me, consistently, that spark either has turned into the written word or the sung word with melody. And don't ask me why. It's worked more than not, and it seems to be resultive in the sense that I've actually gotten something out of it. Where I've gone down other roads and I just hit a dead end at this point. The inspiration point is not consistent. Mm-hmm. It's short-lived.
Got it.
It's like a short romance. Mm-hmm. You know, you go from one day, oh my God, I met the love of my life, to 2 months later you're shaking your head saying, what was I thinking? Why did I chase after him or her, right? I've consistently been attracted to the written word and the sung melody. I don't know why. I can't explain it other than it just calls me. Mm-hmm. And silence seems to bring that forth in a way that culture doesn't.
And for those people that are hanging on the hope that you are having some reunion tour that's been blurbed about now in little bits and pieces in social media, what do you say to them? Is there truth to that, or is this just something you can tell them to go sit in silence and be cool with it?
Yeah, I don't really know, because what you get into the world it is internally and the world as it operates outside. The world as it operates outside is more of an impressionistic, headline-driven world. Mm-hmm. So the simplest headline is Smashing Pumpkins to reunite in 20XX. Right. You know, that's a headline I'd like to see. Mm-hmm. The actual real world, daily lure or interest or curiosity in that comes out of the fact that the band has healed its wounds and is back in communication. And so invariably, of course, that leads to the next best thing, which is like, oh, if you guys can get on the phone and talk, and if James can join you on stage, which he has joined me on stage a couple times.
Right. Last tour.
Was it this year? I'm trying to remember when the last tour was.
I think it was a year ago, because you were traveling across the country this year.
Yeah, it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know.
And Jimmy, and
he's
been on with you. Yeah.
So I get it. I don't really know what to say about it other than, you know, I'll believe it when I see it. And I don't mean it negatively. I mean it positively. Right. Because I don't want to be that person that says, yeah, it's going to happen and I really feel it in my bones. And then it just doesn't click. I don't want to set that expectation not only for others, but also for myself. So I remain hopeful, but, you know, we didn't, as a unit, if you include Darcy in it, as a unit, we have not played together for 18 years. Mm-hmm. So, you know, putting Humpty Dumpty back together again is it's a little bit more complicated than like, hey, let's all meet at the rehearsal space and crank up. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more complicated, and that's not because it's negative. Right. You just don't have the infrastructure and the emotional even infrastructure to re-engage, and so that's all I know about it at the moment. I remain hopeful, and I would love to do it, and I certainly would love to do it with them.
Okay. If people want to find you, William Patrick Corgan on Facebook, also OGILAL. Wait a second, OGLALA. I was putting an
OGILALA.com. It's sort of the website that sort of puts together all the information on the bundles and merch and vinyl. It's one-stop shop for tickets and everything.
Also, your Madame Zuzu's website has a lot of merch and a lot of things there.
Yeah, we're going to sell. In fact, we already offered signed copies of OG Lala on vinyl, and they sold out immediately.
Excellent.
So yeah, but it's not hard to Google. I mean, people find what they're looking for if they're curious.
You're active on Twitter again?
No.
Okay, you're off again. You keep breaking up and getting back together. So you're
off. I've turned over all my social media to my management. I have nothing to do with it anymore.
Okay, because when you were across the country, it seemed like you were active, and now not so much.
Yeah, I've kind of made a personal decision that I don't. If you're not going to be on social media daily to manage your avatar,
right? I think thoughts and memes.
I think the internet is full of constructed characters, and that's actually cool. There are people who are really good at it, and I'm not that interested in doing it consistently. So therefore, I don't think I've done as well at it as I could if I was consistent about it. It doesn't attract me daily, so I think if you're not on there daily, you're doing that image of yourself, which you're constructing, a disservice. So I made the decision to just let it be what it is, which is promoting the avatar, but I don't have anything to do with what the avatar is other than contributing creatively.
Okay. Well, the new album, I have to say, having been graced with the chance to listen to it,
I think you're one of only like 30 people that's heard it. So
it's excellent.
Oh, thank you.
And my favorite cut is cut 11, Archer, and I don't know why. There's just something about it, but you're playing everything. I mean, you're playing piano, you're playing the acoustic guitar, you're doing the singing. So when people are going to come and see you live, are you going to be that guy that has like the foot pedal and then you're crossing over and then you're playing the harmonica and then you're like, what? How's that going to go? It's just you, so you're going to pick an instrument and go.
Yeah, you work with the space that you have.
Right. Okay. So get your tickets if you're listening. If you're driving right now, go to your computer.
Pull over.
Pull over, write it down. Get your tickets for the Anthenaeum, and that's the end of October, and go to ojilala.com for all tour dates. Take a road trip. Go to Nashville. It's close, 6 hours from Chicago. Stay in touch with William on Facebook and his Facebook page, William Patrick Corgan. And stay spiritual. Thank you for your time and for all that you contribute. It's really important. I'm Jenniffer Weigel, and stay spiritual, damn it.